Hello and welcome to Coffee, Tech, and Opportunity. I'm Will McNeil, CEO of Black Tech Jobs, and your host for the show today. We are super excited about you joining us. We have an amazing guest who is going to be a part of what we're doing today. We really aim to bring great conversation and cover topics in and around technology, human resources, recruiting, and D&IB. Without further ado, I want to tell you a little bit about the person who's going to be joining us. Her name is Michelle L. Hudson. And Michelle comes to us from Microsoft. She has a big job there where she plays the role of the director of the Center of Excellence there. And her experience in technology really, I think is going to be rich as people have an opportunity to ask questions at the end, talk with her, and hear the conversation that we're about to have. So without further ado, I want to bring Michelle Hudson to the stage. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Will. How are you?
I'm great. Happy Wednesday to you.
Yes, same to you.
Thank you for joining us, Michelle. We have been looking forward to this conversation for some time now, and especially someone that has your experience. You know, when we've known each other for some time now, and we met, gosh, I feel like it's been 5 or 6 years, maybe longer.
I think it was 2019, I want to say, or 2018.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pre-COVID, which was those are good times too. So we're glad to be back into the world. You
Absolutely.
know, when I think about your bio and your experience, because I've heard you speak before, but I still like to ask this question, hear your story, and have you share it. Um, you, with your background and experience, because you did something else before you got into tech. What did you do before you got into technology?
That's a great question. A little bit of everything. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me today, Will, and just your partnership and your ability to connect people and just being authentically you. So I have benefited so much from knowing you, and I'm excited to be here today. So what did I do before I did, I would say, technology or the role at Microsoft? So I've done a little bit of everything in my career. Like maybe you or some folks listening, people ask, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I struggled with that question a little bit because I saw myself doing so many things, right? And my mother's an educator, my father's a pastor, and so I always had this notion too of, what you do is tied to something bigger, and how do you drive impact where you are and leave a legacy. And so I started my career in a global supply chain quality management role. I used that to dig deeper into Six Sigma and kind of got into the project management space through that. And project management became my jam, right? It became the thing that really I had always done and was able to have a broader platform to do it. Planning, organizing, bringing people together. That was really a skill set that I continued to grow. So that brought me really into technology. So that was my entry point into technology, was through project management. And I have done various areas within tech of both infrastructure and operations, as well as the software engineering and digital side of the house. So that was my kind of career before, if you will, in technology, or before technology, and then my journey over the past few years in technology.
Awesome. You know, whenever I talk to executives about how they get here, there's no singular path. And it's always an interesting story how one thing leads to the other, more so kind of an affinity for a certain interest in technology or a skill set that accumulated over time that really was a good fit.
Yes.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. As a Black tech professional, Black woman professional, and I'm a huge supporter of the advancement of Black women in technology. I'm a father of 3 daughters. And so, and the son of a domestic. So I'm always excited about seeing the great things that women are doing. When you look over your career, what is it like, or what has it been like to be the first or the only Black person to do something? And if you can, so it's a 2-part question, share a cultural conflict experience that you had as a leader and how you got through it. And we're hoping that your story can enrich someone else's situation.
Absolutely. That's a great question. For me, I would say being the only one started fairly early in my life. My parents put my siblings and I through private school, which I believe was honestly just a great foundation for me. And then through that, I was actually the only Black graduate of my high school class. And it was hard. It was a struggle. And at that age, a teenager, like all you want to do is fit in. And so I struggled a bit with like, where do I find my place and wanting to fit in and wanting to kind of look like everyone else or move like everyone else. And so it took me some time. College was a great opportunity for me just to kind of settle in and know that my people are my people and I have people that look all different ways and types and I can fit in wherever I go. And once I got into my career, that situation as far as being the only one, really carried forward and continued. And I would say most in technology. And so I was put into kind of a project management role in IT. I was the only Black female and primarily the only woman really at that time. But for whatever reason, I didn't have struggles in that case. And I worked well with my coworkers. My working style, I would say, is more relational. And so I use that to build relationships. As I thought about the growth of my career at a particular company, I was their first Black female director and senior director. And what that meant for me was I really wanted to show up and I wanted to show up well. I wanted to leave a legacy, and I wanted someone that would be coming right after I came in and they would think, you know what, we think about Michelle when there's someone else that's coming behind me, and I wanted them to say absolutely yes, because I performed, because I built great teams, because I led phenomenally. And so I carried that as my motivation to do extremely well in those roles. From I would say, conflict or like cultural perspective, one of the areas that I've worked through and I'm really currently working through is having a manager or a leader that tends to lean heavily on positional power. So kind of name dropping, or I've arrived at this place and I'm in charge. And so you're kind of navigating that space. And my style is more personal and a little bit more relational. So I'm calling someone up and they're doing something because it's Michelle and because they trust me and because I've built a great relationship, not just because I said so or a leader or another boss said so. And so that's something that I think we may have encountered, you and maybe other folks. So just learning how to navigate in that space for me was an area of conflict, but I would say able to kind of come to the table and discuss differences and ways in which working styles are different and find a path forward.
Yeah, great, great, great. I such good answers, such good answers. When we talk about that, and we talk about your relationship with your boss, because at the higher levels of leadership, your relationships are as important as your skills. I ask everyone this question because I think it's important. So often the mentor-mentee relationship is related to a younger people in their 20s or less. Do you have a mentor today, and describe kind of what that relationship looks like?
I do. I do. And I'll acknowledge I have a bit of a unique experience navigating corporate in that most of my leaders from my corporate experience and working have been Black, African American Black.
Oh, wow.
And at high levels, exactly. And at high levels in the organization. And while I knew it was special, yeah, I have more appreciation for it now than ever before. And just that having that relationship from a leader who is Black that understands the experience, not that it was easy, right? But that I believe a lot of the growth that I've had in my career is because I could take big risks and I could know that they would have my back and they would say, hey, Michelle, do this, don't do that, like move this way. And I was really truly guided and I was trusted to have those big moves and steps. So from that experience, I know that it's unique and I'm very grateful for it. As far as mentors, yes, I do have mentors. And what I like to think about is having a mentor at various stages where I want to go. So for example, I have a mentor that's kind of a peer mentor, right? We're navigating similar spaces, kind of at this cusp of, senior level, but wanting to achieve a higher level. And so I also have a mentor that's, a step up for me, right? At the VP level. And so I'm able to get those insights and understand where I'm at today and what moves do I make to get to that level. And I'm fortunate to have also a mentor at the C-suite. And although time is busy at that point, so I really try to be intentional about that engagement, but it is so valuable to me to have that insight from someone who is at the C-suite level that can guide me and speak into my life, give me business insights, right? How they're navigating that space. So I would suggest kind of thinking about the landscape and where you are and where you want to go and establishing those mentor relationships that you can tap into as you go across your career journey.
You said a lot of powerful things, but one of the things that stick out that I want to highlight too is you said the word mentors. I asked the question singularly, and I think it's critical because not everyone can help with everything, and not because they don't have the talent or skill or experience, but the higher you go up, they may not have the time. The other thing I want to mention about mentoring is it is at a certain point it becomes a two-way street. And one of my mentors, the first time he called me to ask me for advice, I looked at my phone and was like, "Do you have the right number?" Right. And so I'm discovering that having someone whose experience is different, and different doesn't always mean junior, can be super helpful for you. So when I talk to my friends that are CIOs and CTOs and chief commercial officers of companies, they frequently interact with people at every level and they learn things because it's impossible to stay up on all of the new earth stuff. And I have a mentor who's in his 30s, early 30s, is barely 30. And he always identifies me or introduces me as his mentor when I actually do the reverse. And it's kind of a race who gets to put it out there first. But so for those folks who are starting their career, don't underestimate the value you can bring in the early middle stages of your professional life to a team, not just your technical acumen, but the other things you may learn and that can add value to a business relationship. I
Completely.
want to talk about something. Yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit. Um, there's a lot of career stagnation happening for Blacks in tech. I meet a lot of people whose careers are moving sideways, not upward. And a lot of this happens kind of once you get past 10 years of experience. And I think people then kind of settle into a level of acceptance that this is where they are. And what they may not know, they may have just not benefited from being at the right place at the right time. What are your thoughts about this idea of career stagnation? And what are some things that you think people could do to kind of re-kickstart or ignite their career progression?
That's a great question. I do think it's a little bit about perspective as well. So to me, stagnation is, you are in a place and you want to go further. You desire to achieve more. As you and I talk about a lot, Will, like your career is not linear and it's a chess game in a lot of ways. And so there are decisions that you make that are chess moves. And sometimes people choose to go a certain route. Like I moved fast and early in my career. And I've been, kind of at the, I would say like mid-level, director level for a little bit of time in my career. It's also a decision about, where you are in your life. Or maybe there's, care for your parents or care for children, and the desire to go quote unquote higher isn't there right now. So it's about how are you finding satisfaction and joy and challenging yourself in your role and job. And if you're happy where you are, I think that's okay too. Now, if you do desire to be at a higher level, you kind of got to take assessment of where you are and where you're working, right? So as you go higher up, there's less roles. There's only so many vice presidents. There's only so many CEOs and CTOs across the country and across companies. It also depends on, the size and scale of your company. I'm at Microsoft, right? And so the path forward, there's 200,000 people. And so there are, levels and steps that you take to grow your career in that way. This is also where sponsors come to play. So we talked about mentors. Sponsors are a little bit different. Sponsors are the folks that know you and that can speak to your work in rooms that matter. And we talked about this in, I believe, like a fireside chat a while ago, that there are conversations happening in rooms and your name is coming up. And who's going to be that person to say, I know Will, I know his work, I trust in it. We need to take a chance on him. We need to move him forward in the organization. And some of that is really how those forward movements, especially at the higher levels, happen. And so it's important that you think about what sponsors you have. And sometimes you ask for them and sometimes it naturally happens. So if you have a leader, you need to know your leader's peers. That's very important. And you also need to know your leader's leader to a certain extent and establish that relationship. So the stagnation piece, you're right, Will. I think there's a certain point that you achieve and then you try to figure out, okay, where do I want to go from here? And again, sometimes you may or may not want what's coming, further up or after that, depending on where you are in your life. Sometimes the politics get even more hairy the higher you get up. But if there's an area that you are feeling stagnant in, maybe it's more education, more training, and then again, tapping into and knowing that you have sponsorship in those conversations and in those rooms.
Yeah, that is so on point. I would tell you that sponsorship, there's a big difference, and we always say it isn't what you know, it's who you know. And I think as we've gotten more sophisticated with that idea, it's who knows you,
Yes,
and what are they saying about you when you are not present.
absolutely.
So getting those people who will endorse you, remove obstacles, and advance opportunity, and that is networking at its highest form. Just meeting people, exchanging cards, setting up a coffee talk. Those are just the beginnings. And
Hmm.
so I do want to highlight something too about kind of how do you bag these people who could really be sponsors for you. And I have some perspectives, and when I think about it, is show up and be able to add value. And
Yes.
so whether they're a CEO, a CTO, a director, a vice president, or even a manager, depending on where you are in your career, add value to that relationship. There's no one in this world who can't use some additional help.
Yes.
And so where you can help with your skills, and I think you mentioned some other things, developing skills are such a key part. But what are your thoughts about how do you build a relationship with someone today who's a stranger, and that relationship evolves into something meaningful where there's a positive give and take for both parties?
I think the one of the things to understand is how do you know that person and what do you want to glean from them or have them know about you. So let's say you're watching a leader or working with a leader and you maybe have seen them present rather in a town hall or share a graphic that was particularly interesting. Find something to make that connection and tap into, and maybe if it's appropriate depending on kind of the levels in the organization, send an email and say, hey, that really resonated with me, what you said, and this is how I can see myself using it. Just find that initial point of connection. And if it's appropriate, maybe ask to meet with them for an informational and have some key questions that help give you insights, but also allow you to slide in some of your wins. Maybe it's I created this amazing, template. Leaders are constantly being asked to produce, summaries and content and reports. And so if there's anything that you've built they can leverage and use, that's something you can bring impact to. Now that we're in the world of AI, maybe you have some amazing prompts that you've used that you can share with them. So to your point of being able to provide that value, those are some of the areas. And then once you've established that and make your interest known, hey, I really am interested in having a project that focuses on the finances of our company. If you hear anything about that or a place where I can participate in a project, will you please keep me in mind? So maybe it's not always a job initially, but maybe it's an opportunity for you to provide services or help in a particular project or an area that business that you're interested in. So those are some of the things I would suggest to build that sponsorship and to allow them to get to know you more. But for an official, like in that room, they do need to know a little bit more about who you are in your work. So that's a continuous process and engaging with that sponsor.
I love it. It's a process, not an event. And for those who are watching, don't believe that no is the end. It is a delay, and not everyone is going to have the opportunity. There's more people pursuing help than there are those who are capable of giving it at the level you may believe you want today. The other thing I just wanted to highlight was that was such a 21st century, 2024 gem to drop on adding value by sharing a prompt that's helping. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, and if you're out there today and you're not improving your AI prompting engineering skill set, man, you're missing out. There's huge opportunities there. And what a great way to expand your network and build relationships. I want to pivot a bit, shift gears. There's been a ton of layoffs over the last couple of years, and so many highly skilled Black professionals have been laid off, and some of them more than once during the pandemic. And so there's a lot of folks who are feeling lots of things as they try to think about their path forward professionally. What are your thoughts about contract work or consulting assignments as the means to get you back into the work world or as an alternative to traditional W-2 work or full-time jobs?
Yes, and yes. I, in fact, have thought about that myself. And when we think about what happened in the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, a workforce that was going into the office every day was now needing to do the same amount of work and sometimes more from remote or home locations. What does that require, right? A build out of, if you didn't have cloud, my gosh, you were really in trouble. But an expansion or build out of your cloud so that your team members could access your data systems and services, a lot of updates, right, of company systems, phone systems, technologies, web services, which require even more network bandwidth. So when you think about the needs that arose from a technology perspective because of the pandemic, we now needed to hire a lot of those roles, right, from a build out perspective. So we needed engineers, we needed network engineers, we needed platform engineers, software engineers, and then who's going to hire them? Talent acquisition. So now we're hiring a lot of recruiters and HR folks. And so as a company, once you've built out those services, then you now have a way of working. Like think about the house being built, right? You're now moving into a maintenance mode. So all the things, all the people that were builders, quote unquote, you now need more maintenance and more support teams, and you may not be hiring as many people. So that was a lot of the roles. From my understanding, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in that, but that was a lot of the roles that we saw rolling off or being laid off kind of post-pandemic was the just the amount of engineers and folks in those roles were no longer needed because those systems that were needed during the pandemic were built and they were now kind of in maintenance or support mode. The other interesting thing that I see, and I've talked to an HR kind of recruiter and leader about this, is in George Floyd in 2020, right? It was just a lot happening in that space, and a lot of companies made a lot of commitments around diverse hiring and really investing in our communities. Let's tie back now to, and they did that, right? Let's tie back to kind of the downslope of the COVID build out and roles. When companies do mass layoffs, they actually have to like announce it and publicize it, and they have to have a certain methodology for doing it. So it could be a first in, first out, which a lot of companies do. And who did they just most recently hire, right? A lot of Black and brown people. So if you have a certain methodology for a layoff or mass layoff, that's the methodology. So the first in, last in, first out. I'm sorry, I should have said last in. Last in, first out is a method that's used. Sometimes it's performance management, but companies have to abide by that methodology they use for the layoffs. So that is some of the reason why we might have felt or seen a larger number of Black and brown folks impacted with layoffs.
Yeah, and it's been tough because I've met and talked to a lot of people who are, and some of them, as I mentioned before, on their second layoff since COVID, are trying to find a new role, and some of them are finding roles slowly, and it's taking longer. So for those of you who are watching, or those of you who will watch the replay, don't be completely discouraged if it's taking you twice as long as it has historically, or if it's never taken you a long time, and this is the first time it's ever been difficult. This is the time that it's happening. And it's a very serious piece. I'm gonna highlight a few data points, and I'll share this on LinkedIn on our page underneath this. Market Watch published a piece out. They did a huge survey on what was happening, and a lot of people are kind of preparing for layoffs. It's as if you see an accident coming and you're flinching. Here's a couple of the key highlights I'm going to share. 70% of employees are bracing for layoffs in some way. About 40% are saving up for possible layoffs, and 32% say they are regularly browsing job listings. They also kind of dive in generationally too. So I'll give a couple of highlights from the Gen Z crowd. Gen Z workers rate their job security the lowest of any generation, with 57% reporting layoff anxiety. And so this is a serious issue impacting the technology community as a whole. I just as recently in the news, I heard that Facebook is closing down their Austin offices. I heard that General Motors is laying off, I think, 15% of their salaried workers. There's some big things happening out there. Some of it AI related, but I'm not sure that AI has advanced from a not from a user perspective, or I should say a buyer perspective. A lot of companies are still struggling with how to implement AI into their workforce. So the sellers of AI are all fired up, ready to go. buyers in AI or the users, the customers, when I talk to CIOs and CTOs, they're still trying to figure out what's the best way to deploy this and what's the next best step. But in the midst of all of this, all these things are happening. Share some advice or any tips that you may have as it relates to getting back into the game and staying resilient during a time when some people have been out of work for greater than a year.
Yeah. I realize I didn't revisit the question on contract work. Yes, I do think that that is definitely a tool in your toolbox. So I try to think about what tools do I have in my toolbox. If you don't already have maybe an LLC that you can tap into and do contract work for, do that now. And that way, if you're in a position where you ever have to use it, you can go into that engagement and be paid for it. A lot of companies do look for contract work. I would say bigger companies, it's a little hard to navigate that space. So they tend to focus on bigger contracts. But a lot of companies do use vendors because that labor is variable and they're able to, bring it in as needed. And so the key to that is, still secure, be looking for something. If you are doing contract work, that you have the next thing lined up, or that you are continuing to seek for a more permanent role, if that's what you desire. And then another tool in your toolbox, right, is what certifications can you get while you are, looking, or maybe, not working full time. All that will add to your toolbox. What organizations can you be involved in? Can you volunteer? I work with our Chamber of Commerce here in Chicagoland area. I volunteer. I'm an executive board advisory member for 1 Million Degrees, which focuses on city colleges. And so, what are the ways in which you can continue to grow and engage your skill set and meet people? That's a great way to network and to highlight your skill set. So, take an assessment of the tools in your toolbox, and more times than not, your next role is going to come from someone that you know or that knows you in spaces like that, especially when hiring is tight.
Yeah, yeah. We're actually pivoting as a company too. So traditionally, we've done exclusively full-time placement, and
Mhm.
we have migrated to where becoming that company that does contract work. So if you're watching this, or someone in your network is out of work or has been out of work for an extended period of time, you can visit us at blacktechjobs.com and build a profile. We are expanding that business rapidly. We have a number of new clients that we're bringing on board, and we really want to be able to help people migrate and quickly get back. The other advantage of the contracting work, kind of going back to the previous question, is you can build on new skills, work with different people, and expand your network while you're economically recovering as well. And so I think there was a time where contract work had lots of different views. Part of it was lifestyle. So I knew people who were digital nomads, and they traveled and they did contract work, and they would shut down for periods of time to do things with family and friends. So there's a lot of pluses to it, but there's still a lot to learn. We'll be talking about that more in another Coffee Tech and Opportunity, where we're going to really dedicate some time to that. I think it's important that we begin those discussions and to really think smartly about how we package careers at the professional level. And I meet lots of people who have a good buddy of mine who's a fractional CIO, another one who's a fractional chief um, financial officer. And so there's a lot of ways to leverage your talents and skills in a job market that might be bumpy. And so I've asked folks who are watching this to chat their questions to us, because I do want to turn it over to our studio audience. I'm going to ask one more question before we wrap, and then I'm going to flip it over. We talked about a lot of things, but I really want to dive into something about you, because I am so enamored with just you as a human. Um, what would your world be like if you never had a bump in the road,
Ooh,
every light was green, and you were granted every opportunity that came your way?
wow. I would not be me. I would not be me. And I would say one of the things I look for as a hiring manager is resiliency. And because life is hard and you're going to encounter blockers, you're going to have things that don't go your way. And it's in that space that it truly tests who you are. It truly tests your ability. I'm going through it. I've been through it, right? It truly tests your ability to be resilient and to see and to find a path forward. And so, although it's been hard, I'm sure people have experienced, challenges and hardness. But if everything went our way, how would we persevere? How would we learn how to get past those blockers and to be okay with failure and to trust ourselves to try again? So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for every closed door. I'm thankful for every challenge, every difficult leader, every role that I felt, wasn't a fit, or that I felt blocked, or I couldn't figure it out, because it's brought me to where I am today. And I wouldn't change that for the world. I absolutely wouldn't.
I love that answer. So for those of you who are going through challenges and struggles today, while it's difficult to hear, it isn't the solution you want, but know that this is preparing you for something. I couldn't agree with that more. I'm gonna Artist Ford asked a question. What advice do you have for professionals who want to grow without compromising their personal values and identity? Great question, Artist.
It is. And I know artist sport, in fact. Thank you for that
Okay.
question. Yeah, I think it's finding out where you best fit, and who wants you, right? Like, there's every place that you might want to go or be may not be the best fit for you. So, as a Black woman, like, I have natural hair. I wear it in a lot of different styles and ways, and I was really stressed about that when I went natural, and how I was going to be received at work, and was I going to be viewed professionally. And at the end of the day, if my hair is the problem you have, like, you don't need me here. And if I can't be myself, I don't need to be here. And so I think there's a balance of obviously understanding the game, right? It's a chess game. So understanding the game and the space in which you're at, and how to play that game where you're at. But then know that you have the right and the decision to move how you want to move, and to find spaces and places that fit your values, that fit your working style, that fit your way of leading, right? Like, culture, those things are so important. So I would say, find those spaces, and I know artists were working on that.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And someone asked, Rhonda asked me to repeat that, and I believe it was, where might you connect if you have an interest in doing contract work? I'm going to post the link in the chat.
Great.
So please take a look there. And it should, right now it's showing up on YouTube, but it's at blacktechjobs.com. In the top right corner of the page, click profiles, and you can log in using your LinkedIn login to do that as well.
Will is the person to know. Will, you are the person to know, and the connector of people. I really like that
There,
about
and
you.
also, if you are in talent acquisition, you're watching. We've invited a few talent acquisition folks in our network to join us. Please highlight that you're hiring so that we can connect people to you as well. And for those who are watching the live stream and those who will watch the replay, who will join us. Artist had another question I want to bring up really quick too. Artist says, as a Black woman who's risen to a senior leadership position in such a prominent company, what was the pivotal moment that shaped your career and your leadership style?
Ooh, that's a really good question. As I said before, I have had some amazing leaders in my career. So much so that I feel very, very blessed. And I know that's not the experience for a lot of people, but for me, just like God guided my steps in that way. So a lot of my leadership style comes from how I've experienced leaders and how I've been led. And so I really try to emulate, right, those behaviors, both from a leader perspective, like finding a leader that is really a leader, right? There's a difference between being a leader and a manager. Finding a leader that is passionate about the team, wanting them to grow, see impact, and also an expert and drives impact and brings results to the business. Having both of those is rare, but it's such a treasure when you can find it. And so that's one of the things I really focus on based on the leaders that I have. And you know, and you can do it wherever you're at, right? Like, I realize that Microsoft is definitely one of the largest tech companies and the pinnacle. And I encourage everyone in your career, especially like new in career, try a few different flavors and seasons of companies, right? Like, maybe a super, super large company, there's a lot of benefits there. But there's also spaces in which, you're kind of navigating and jockeying, and there's, a lot of folks that you're working with and trying to understand the business. Whereas maybe at a smaller company or startup, you're wearing a lot of hats and you're driving decisions, and you get to know everyone, and the C-suite is not that far away. So I would say kind of think about what's most important to you as well in being a leader, and find that space that best supports that.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thanks, Aris, for the question.
Mm.
Appreciate that. Good question, great answer, great conversation today. For those of you who joined us later and didn't catch the first part of it, please come back. You can visit our page either on YouTube or Twitter, or I should say X now, and or LinkedIn, and watch the replay from the beginning. And if you had friends who weren't able to make it, or had meetings or had called away, because we call this coffee tech an opportunity for a reason. It happens kind of midday when you're having your coffee. Feel free to come back and watch the replay. There's great comments in the very early part of our discussion. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and issue my thank you for all of you who come to listen in and watch from near and far across the country and abroad. And very special thank you to Michelle Hudson for joining us today, our special guest. And we thank you for all your knowledge and experience. For those of you who are trying to connect with Michelle, for those of you, I know I'm gonna before I completely give it away, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. But Michelle, before we go, tell us what you're working on. You mentioned one of the philanthropic activities you're working on with is it 100,000 degrees or 1 million degrees?
Hmm.
Great organization based out of Chicago.
Yeah.
There's other things, projects you're working on or initiatives that you may need assistance with. Please share those now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am in the Chicagoland area. There are lots of organizations that are seeking Black professionals in technology and just in general to work with students, with early in career professionals. So there's lots of organizations. If you're interested, please reach out to me and I'm happy to connect you. From a work perspective, I lead essentially kind of a central project management office. And one of the things I love is just engaging with all parts of our business as well as our data center operation. So I'm part of data centers. If you have not really delved into that part of technology, it's essentially where the cloud lives. Okay, the cloud is not in the sky. It is, in fact, very, very large infrastructures that support the cloud. And so technology, one of the things I love is that it's so broad and so deep. So if you have not really delved into the idea of data centers and all the infrastructure components of technology, I would encourage you to do that. It's fascinating. And there's a lot of opportunity there. There are data centers all over the world that are being built out and maintained and managed by companies. And so it's a great opportunity from a career perspective. But those are things that I work on in my day-to-day job. I'm involved, with my church. And teach preschool, which I really enjoy as well. So just about keeping life full and full of things that inspire me, full of things that I like to learn. I'm taking a sewing class in November. And so I encourage you just to continue to grow yourself and to find ways to expand your knowledge and your areas of interest that you have.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you again, Michelle. Thanks everyone for joining us for Coffee, Tech, and Opportunity. I'm Will McNeil, CEO of Black Tech Jobs, and we're going to continue to do what we do, and that's connecting Black tech professionals to great places to work. All the best, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Bye
Thank
now.
you so much. Thank you, Will.